Rome had come to expect a certain amount of spectacle from the Emperor Gaius. Not the sober ceremonies of the old Republic, nor even the dignified pageantry of the first two Caesars, but the type of grandeur that could only be showcased by an emperor capable of defeating the god Neptune and riding his horse across the water. And Caligula did not mean to disappoint. Beneath the wooded slopes sacred to the goddess Diana, in the lake known as her Mirror, two immense vessels floated gently on the still surface of the water. But these ships were not built for war or for trade. Caligula had ordered the two barges built for pleasure. Each barge boasted shining marble flooring. The cabins and hallways were adorned with bronze statues and coloured gemstones. Marble columns rose from the decks, as though temples set adrift upon the water. And at night, the entire lake shimmered with the torchlight reflected upon its surface. Courtiers, senators, and favoured guests, all those who had made the day's journey from Rome, now reclined upon lush couches beneath silk awnings, while servants moved quietly among them, pouring wine and carrying silver trays heavy with fruits and roasted meats. And at the centre of it all sat Caligula, reclined comfortably among his companions and his wife, watching in anticipation as the servants hastily prepared for the evening's entertainment. At last, when the guests had found their places, wine cups filled and expectant faces turned toward the centre of the barge, Caligula rose. "All the way from Rome," he announced with a theatrical flourish, "I present to you Menista." Applause rippled across the deck as the young performer stepped forward to the emperor's side. Menista was already famous throughout the city, admired not only for his considerable skill, but also for the unusual favour he enjoyed at the imperial court as Caligula's own dance instructor. "Menista has agreed," the emperor announced, raising a hand for silence, "to grace us with several selections from his upcoming performance at the Palatine Games in a few weeks." Then, without warning, Caligula reached forward and seized the dancer's tunic, pulling him close. Before the assembled senators, nobles, and courtiers, the emperor kissed Menista passionately upon the mouth. The entire barge fell silent. Caligula watched the discomfort ripple across their faces, even as their eyes flicked toward his wife, Caesonia, to gauge her reaction. Caesonia sat upright, lifting her chin. A defiant expression spread across her face. Then she began to applaud. The rest of the guests quickly followed, offering applause that was both polite and enthusiastic in equal measure. Menista stepped back and bowed deeply. Caligula left him standing in the centre of the room and returned to his place beside his wife, kissing her lightly on the cheek as he sat. Several of the torches were extinguished, casting the room into shadow, save for the small circle of light at its centre, where Menista held his opening pose. Then the music began. Caligula watched with amusement, occasionally applauding a particularly graceful movement. Around him, the assembled guests followed the performance with spellbound enthusiasm, their reactions always mirroring his own. He had been right about them all along. Sycophants, every one of them. No matter what he did, no matter whom he married, no matter whom he took as a lover, they always acquiesced. That's why they hated him. He did not bend to custom, he made it. Caligula's eyes began to slide discreetly across the room, noting the rehearsed smiles and reactions of his guests. Across the deck, near the edge of the pavilion, he noticed one of his principal freedmen standing in quiet conversation. Callistus, one of Caligula's advisers, and the man who had brought the plot of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus to the emperor's attention. The freedman spoke softly with a young man whose face Caligula recognized, Metellus, son of a Metellus who sat in the Senate. Yet Metellus the son came without his father. But as Caligula watched, something in the exchange caught his attention. Metellus glanced toward the emperor, then immediately fell silent when he saw Caligula's eyes on him. For an instant he appeared uncertain, then quickly turned his attention back to Menista's performance, clapping excitedly at the slightest movement of the dancer. Callistus seemed momentarily puzzled, watching as Metellus withdrew his attention. Then he shrugged and turned his smile to another guest. But in Caligula's thoughts, the moment lingered. Once again, the formal triclinium of the Palatium had been prepared. Dinner in the imperial palace had become a daily spectacle whenever the emperor was in Rome. Tables were laid with lavish foods and costly wines. Musicians waited with their instruments, while poets and philosophers lingered nearby, prepared to offer recitations or conversation should the emperor request it. Guests whose invitations had been issued only that morning now reclined upon the couches in their finest togas, while slaves moved quietly among them, removing sandals and washing travel dust from their feet. The guest list changed from day to day. To dine with the emperor was an honour, and the invitations had to be carefully managed, so that every man favoured by Caligula might, sooner or later, be seen among his company. Some came eagerly. Others came because refusing such an invitation was unthinkable. Reclining comfortably upon her dining couch sat Caesonia Melonia, Caligula's wife, Empress of Rome. She plucked at a dish of ripe fruit, while nearby slaves fanned her gently with great feathers. At another table sat Uncle Claudius beside his wife, the beautiful Valeria Messalina, a woman Caligula had more than once wondered if he had overlooked. For a moment he studied her, then he dismissed the thought. Messalina might have been wealthy, and she might have been beautiful, but the fortune she had brought to Claudius had already been claimed, swallowed by the expensive priesthood Caligula had recently saddled his uncle with. Otherwise, he reflected idly, Messalina might have made a most profitable addition to the harem of senatorial wives now residing in the Palatium. Cassius, who oversaw the daily guest list, moved easily among the couches, ensuring the comfort of the diners. From sofa to sofa he drifted, engaging guests in casual conversations from which he gathered the latest rumours and whispers to carry back to the emperor. At the moment, Cassius stood speaking with Metellus the father, who had not attended Caligula's gathering at Diana's mirror. Metellus, Caligula called, his voice cutting lightly through the triclinium's rising din. We missed you at our gathering on the lake. Startled, Metellus swallowed a mouthful of cheese and goat's liver before looking up with a quick smile. Yes, Caesar, he said with a tone of regret. I was on my estate in Tusculum when the invitation arrived in Rome. My son attended in my stead. I hear it was a spectacle of rare magnificence. Yes, Caligula agreed mildly. Your absence was noticed. Your son attended without you, just as this evening you attend without your son. Metellus inclined his head. Yes, Caesar. When the invitation arrived this afternoon, my son was not at home. Caligula regarded him for a moment, his eyes steady upon the senator. Then almost casually he spoke. That is because I had him arrested this afternoon. Metellus's mouth fell open. Caligula raised his hands and clapped them once. The doors to the triclinium were flung open. Metellus's son was dragged inside, bound in chains and held fast between two praetorian guards. The room fell silent. Metellus the father stared. The young man was already badly beaten, his face bruised and swollen, his nose broken, blood running slowly from his chin while dark rings circled both eyes. The senator's face drained of colour. How many slaves do you own, Metellus? Caligula asked mildly, including those on your estate in Tusculum? But he did not wait for an answer. Most country estates require 400 slaves or more simply to maintain the land, he continued. And like most men of your rank, you possess properties across Italy. Caligula's gaze shifted briefly toward the battered young man standing between the guards. That is quite a number of slaves, he said calmly, should a man ever decide to arm them. But Caesar, Metellus pleaded, our slaves are not armed. Not yet, Caligula agreed, but I am told there is a plot formed against me, and your son's behaviour on my pleasure barge was somewhat suspicious. We know of no plots, Caesar, Metellus urged quickly. Perhaps you do, Caligula replied, or perhaps you do not. In either case, we shall soon find out. The emperor pointed toward an empty table set in clear view of the room. The praetorian guards dragged the young Metellus forward and threw him down upon it. Chains clattered against the wood as they forced his arms wide. Steel flashed as the guards drew their blades. "Make the cuts small," Caligula instructed calmly. "I want him to feel death approaching, slowly." The first scream shattered the easy murmur of the triclinium. Conversation died instantly. Guests froze upon their couches, wine cups suspended in mid-air, eyes fixed upon the struggling Metellus at the table. No one spoke. Many were visibly uncomfortable, yet none dared look away, lest even that small gesture draw the emperor's attention. "Stop, please," Metellus cried. "I will tell you everything. Only release my son." The soldiers halted, their blades still pressed against the young man's flesh. All eyes turned toward the emperor. "I'm listening," Caligula said. "There is a plot against you," Metellus confessed. "You are meant to be killed." Caligula's expression shifted to one of exaggerated surprise. "Why should anyone wish to kill me?" he asked lightly. "The great-grandson of the divine Augustus?" Metellus stared at him in disbelief. "Why should they not wish to kill you?" he demanded. "You bankrupt Rome's most noble houses to fund your own extravagance, pleasure barges, floating bridges. And if we do not leave you a sufficient portion in our wills, you declare them invalid and seize everything, casting our families into ruin." His voice rose as the guards tightened their grip on his son. "You humiliate the legions, forcing them to gather seashells as if they are children upon a beach. And you sell us our own wives, whom you keep here as hostages in this gilded cage." Caligula yawned. "Names," he said simply. "I want the names." Metellus' mouth tightened. "Clemens," he said boldly, "the commander of your Praetorian Guard." Caligula straightened. "And the senator Faustus Cornelius Sulla," Metellus continued. "Your dancing master, Menista, is in on the plot as well, and so is your secretary, Callistus." A crash drew every eye in the room. Callistus stood frozen, a look of terror and disbelief on his face. At his feet lay a tray of figs he had just dropped. Caligula's eyes narrowed. It had been to Callistus that Metellus the son had spoken so suspiciously upon the pleasure barge. "Your uncle Claudius is in on it too," Metellus declared, lifting his chin defiantly, "and so is your empress Caesonia." Now it was Caligula whose mouth fell open. His eyes darted suspiciously around the triclinium, where many of these newly named conspirators still reclined upon their couches. Then he turned to his wife and caught her looking directly at him, eyes calm. "Well," she asked calmly, "are you going to kill me now? You've promised often enough to have my pretty throat cut." "Yes," Caligula responded suspiciously, "and you have always offered it." "And I offer it still," she replied. "If you believe him, then you must preserve the state of the empire, even at my expense." Then Caligula's eyes slid back to Metellus the father, a smirk spread across his face. "I see now," he said. "By naming every person in my inner circle, you think to isolate me, to make me afraid of everyone." Then he looked back to the Praetorians holding down Metellus the son. "You may finish your task," he said, as he picked a stuffed mushroom from his plate and fed it to Caesonia. "And when you've finished, you may continue on his father." The Circus Maximus was full. The long, narrow chariot track, surrounded by 3 towering tiers of stone seating, had hosted Rome's spectacles for more than 6 centuries. Chariot races, hunts of exotic beasts, and elaborate performances staged before crowds larger than any other city in the empire could gather. And today, the masses had come again. As the Palatine Games neared their final day, more than 250,000 spectators packed themselves into the seats, eager to watch the chariots thunder around the Spina. It was the final race of the festival, and all of Rome had come to see it. Elsewhere on the Palatine Hill, performers prepared for the evening's entertainments. After the races, spectators would have to choose pantomime, poetry, or music, each scheduled in the small theatres scattered across the imperial gardens. But the race was the last spectacle that drew the entire city together in one place. It had been a successful festival, Caligula reflected as he reclined comfortably in the imperial box. Each day had brought greater spectacle than the last, and all of it free to the citizens of Rome, as the Palatine Games were held without charge. What pleased the people, however, rarely pleased the Senate. The two seemed almost opposed in everything. Even now, the senators grumbled among themselves about Caligula's recent annexation of one of Africa's richest kingdoms, Mauritania. Its king, Ptolemy, had been Caligula's cousin. Both men were descendants of Marcus Antonius, the emperor through Antonius's marriage to Octavia Thurina, sister of the divine Augustus, and Ptolemy through Antonius's union with Egypt's last queen, Cleopatra. Ptolemy had been invited by Caligula to attend the plebeian games, held in November. These games featured spectacles much like the Palatine Games, though with a greater emphasis on gladiatorial combats and chariot racing. On the opening day, Ptolemy, dressed in a rich Tyrian purple robe and flanked by his honour guard, made his grand entrance into the Circus Maximus to an enthusiastic roar of applause. When the emperor formally renewed his title as friend and ally of the Roman people, the cheers swelled to thunder. Then, that very night, Ptolemy was executed and Mauritania formally annexed. Caligula shook his head. What had he been thinking, entering the circus in purple? The colour of imperial power. As the crowd's excitement began to fade and the seats slowly emptied, Caligula's attention drifted as well. The races were nearly finished, and the spectacle had begun to lose its charm. Uncle Claudius had already departed nearly an hour earlier, hobbling back toward the palace in search of dinner. But Caligula was not hungry. A bath, however, would not go amiss, especially after sitting so long in the dust-filled air of the Circus Maximus. Gathering his purple toga about him, Caligula rose from the imperial box and departed, followed by his personal guards. These were men he trusted, appointed not by Clemens, who had recently been accused of heading a plot against him, an accusation Caligula was not entirely certain was true, but by Cassius, the praetorian prefect of his own household. As he left the Circus Maximus behind, he passed one of the Palatine's theatres, where a troupe of dancers rehearsed for their upcoming performance. Caligula paused for a moment to watch as the dancers spun, formed their lines, and struck their poses for an audience not yet in attendance. Then he entered the Cryptoporticus, the enclosed tunnel that carried him quickly back to the palace without forcing him through the crowded streets. Just inside the entrance he was met by Chaerea, who took over his protection from the two guards assigned to him. Chaerea closed the door behind them. "What is the watchword?" he asked. Caligula thought for a moment, then answered, "Jupiter." He had barely taken another step when he heard Chaerea's voice behind him. "Then take this, Jupiter." The blade plunged into his back, between his shoulder and his neck, with a flash of white-hot pain. Caligula collapsed instantly, screaming in pain. From behind the barred door came the sound of pounding fists. But the entrance had been sealed, and Caligula lay alone in the tunnel, with Chaerea standing above him. Blood poured from the wound in his neck as he writhed on the ground, shouting, "I'm still alive!" Then he saw the others, Gaius Sabinus, Marcus Vinicius, and others he did not immediately recognise. They emerged from around the corner where they had been waiting, daggers drawn, an evil intent in their eyes.